Dr. Zahir Sahloul, who is visiting us from the United States, and he's the head of Global, to give us his perspective of what he had witnessed during his visit to the camps this past week. Dr. Zahir.
Thank you, Hassan. Good evening, or good afternoon. I traveled from Chicago to Idlib to convey the picture, the humanitarian picture, to the American people who are very concerned about what's happening in Idlib. I wanted to tell the people of Idlib that you are not forgotten. We are with you. The American people care about what's going on in Idlib and want their government to do more, to provide more aid and to end the crisis. Mosques in the United States, churches and synagogues have been praying for the Syrian children in Idlib and sending donations. American faith leaders are speaking out in support of the Syrian civilians in Idlib and everywhere else in Syria. One of the churches, the Church of the Latter-day Saints, or the Mormon Church, sent donations of $150,000 to help in the evacuation and shelter. Many Christian, Jewish, and Muslim Americans have donated also. The Syrian diaspora has been generous throughout the crisis. I have many American doctors and nurses who would love to volunteer with Med Global in Idlib in spite of the bombs. They want to be with the Syrian people, to help the patients of Idlib, and to be with their Syrian colleagues. The children of Idlib are suffering. They are being targeted by the Russian and the Syrian regime bombs and missiles. They are cold without shelter. Most are unable to go to schools. They have no food or medicine. Their mothers are suffering and their future is bleak. Save the Children released a report just today saying that 175,000 children have been displaced in the last 3 weeks. 175,000. Every day, they said, there's an average of one Syrian child being killed in Idlib in the last 6 months. In 1 month, more children were killed in Idlib than the whole 2018 year. We wanted to ring the bells that what's happening is beyond catastrophic in Idlib. What's happening is not fair. I have been with a family of 6 people, a mother and 6 children, who ended up in a room that hosts 3 families in a deserted building in Idlib city. They left Ma'arat al-Nu'man 3 weeks ago. I asked the mother, "What do you need?" And she had tears in her eyes, and she said, "Everything." I saw a disabled man who is sleeping on a thin mattress. He has spinal cord injury. He needs a special bed for his disability to prevent bed ulcers. We spent part of the night in one of the refugee camps. There are 1,150 refugee camps or displaced camps in Idlib. It was raining, it was a very cold night, mud was everywhere. We had to wear long boots to be able to walk through the mud. Syria is beyond catastrophic. After 9 years of the crisis and repeated large-scale displacement, which became the norm in the Syrian crisis, it does not appear that the United Nations has a plan to deal with an emergency situation like this. They have left the local NGOs, more or less, to deal with this displacement of 350,000 civilians on their own. Why is there not an emergency fund that can be deployed right away? There is no UN official who visited Idlib and met with the people whom they are supposed to protect and provide humanitarian assistance in the last 9 years. The media has been absent in action for many reasons. I was watching TV in the last few days of the coverage of the Australian bush fire, which is very important, which led to the displacement of 100,000 people in Australia, a continent with large resources. There's very minimal coverage of the displacement of 350,000 people in a small area in northwest Syria. We should all care about the koalas but the Syrian children deserve more attention. They are also cute. They are being burned alive. Compared to the media coverage of the Australian fires, there are very minimal coverage of the worst displacement in our lifetime. A displacement of 1 million people and mounting in a small area in northwest Syria. There is one Arab country who pledged to donate millions of dollars to help in the Australian bushfires. And the same country has cut its funding to a hospital, to the largest hospital in Idlib, that is providing support to 240,000 patients every year. I call on the United Nations Security Council member countries, especially Russia, to stop the bombing of children, doctors, and women in Idlib. They are not your enemies. I call on President Donald Trump, my president, to make Syria a priority and apply all diplomatic pressure to end the Syrian crisis based on the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2254 and increase the humanitarian assistance to Syrian civilians in Idlib through the local NGOs, not the United Nations. The Syrian people have suffered enough. Your legacy, Mr. President, will be determined what you do or you do not do in Syria, the same way that Syria has determined the legacy of President Obama. I call on the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres to make the catastrophe in Idlib a priority. Mr. Antonio Guterres should visit Idlib like he visited other disaster regions, claiming deep concerns about the crisis from his comfortable office of the United Nations in New York City is not enough. He should be in the field. It is his duty. And if he does not want to be there, then he should resign. What is happening in Syria and Idlib is a stain on the United Nations record and an utter failure of their rigid and outdated system. The United Nations Security Council should review and approve the cross-border aid resolution that is set to expire today. Russia and China should lift their veto and renew the resolution for 1 more year. The Syrian children are not their enemies. Without this resolution, 4 million people will be affected. The horrible situation in Idlib will be made even much worse. And in spite of that, I can tell you that the Syrian children, the Syrian people are very resilient. They are dealing with the catastrophe with their limited resources. They are burning olive pits to warm their children instead of the diesel fuel because there is no enough diesel fuel. They are burning even plastic on the stove to warm their children. And as a physician, I know the long-term consequences of inhaling plastic vapors that will lead to cancer in the future. It is our loss if we do not help them. I asked the children of the camp what they want to be in the future. Some wanted to be engineers, some wanted to be architects, some wanted to be even presidents. But more than 50% of the children wanted to be doctors, including Asma and Huda. So in spite of their ordeals, they want to be doctors in the future. I hope that the international community will listen to them and give them the chance to be the source of healing for the region instead of being a source of hopelessness.